Hey guys, this is Anand Shimpi from AnandTech.com. This is the official AnandTech podcast. We are here on our 8th episode, and we've got a big one for you guys. So joining us, as always, we have Brian Klug, our senior smartphone editor.
Hello, everyone.
We have Dr. Ian Cuttress, senior motherboard editor.
Hey.
And for the first time, it took us 8 episodes to get here, we have Vivek Gowrie, who's our, I guess you're all things mobile now? Like, you just kind of cover everything of interest to you, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of just roam around in smartphones, tablets, laptops, anything.
Yeah, and hopefully I'm going to probably try and rope you into helping us with just immense amount of Windows 8 coverage that we're hopefully going to be having here in the next few weeks.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Cool. So we have a full house. We have a lot to talk about. We want to start out with some motherboard discussion, some Haswell stuff, move into Vivek just finished his review of the second generation Razer Blade. We never talked about the new Kindles, so we want to talk about that. There's the T-Mobile acquisition. Vivek is now Vivek, you're a mechanical engineer or materials science major?
I'm a mechanical engineer.
Okay, so your engineering has actual results to it, not operating in like whatever weird space, the stuff I learned about.
No.
So with you here, we want to talk about anodization and some of the like scuff stuff that's been happening around iPhone 5 and get your take on that. And as well, there's some new HTC announcements and things like that we'll get to. So to start out, last week when we finished the podcast, Ian went on to kind of tell Brian and I about some of the stuff he's working on, which is actually focused around new EFI BIOSes that have an impact on boot and post times. Is that right, Ian?
Yeah. Yes.
So what's going on?
So, just to recall what I've been doing in my testing, ever since the Z77 and Ivy Bridge platform came out, people asked for boot time tests. So I took my standard setup and measured the post times. So this is taking the board, processor at stock, 4 sticks of memory, 2 graphics cards in USB devices, and most boards generally at stock settings would boot anywhere sort of between 11 and 20 seconds. That's from when you press the power button till the Windows logo starts spinning around. With the post, what we're dealing with is initializing controllers on board, making sure the memory settings are applicable, identifying what's in the system, what's plugged in. There's temperature sensors, fan sensors, USB 3 controllers if there's additional USB 3 ports. These all take time to initialize, which all gets added into the post time. We can disable a lot of what that is, and on some boards that can offer an 8-second decrease in the post time. A lot of boards sort of stay near the same. We had a couple of boards that sort of posted in sub 10 seconds, which was they just seem to bypass a lot of that stuff. And we tend to, in the testing over these sort of 15, 16 Z77 boards that I've done, there seem to be sort of a graded scale, as in certain manufacturers would appear generally at the same sort of times. So in terms of fast booting boards, we had ASRock, EVGA, and MSI, and on sort of the 15 to 20 seconds, we'd have Gigabyte and ASUS, who we know often have a lot of additional controllers on board to manage with power, overclocking, and all the other stuff that those top tier motherboards seem to have. Then last month, I came across the P8 Z77V Premium. This is ASUS's high-end $450 motherboard, and it came shipped to me with their new cap BIOS. They didn't tell me really what it was. They just said, have a go. So I was expecting sort of 18-second boot times with my setup, and we saw 10-second boot times. So they'd obviously done something inside their BIOS to either bypass their controllers or make their controllers recognize what the previous settings were and just auto-initialize them, make sure nothing's changed. So delving a bit more into this cat BIOS. It turns out that ideally it's for Windows 8, for fast booting and full Windows 8 functionality. And then I got a call from MSI last week. Interestingly, they said, we've got something new and exciting. We'll ship you a board and a GPU. Both the motherboard and the GPU have updated BIOSes, and you should see boot times to Windows in between 2 to 4 seconds. That obviously is standing back and going, well, hang on, turn on 2 to 4 seconds. Isn't that similar to hibernation? I haven't received the equipment yet, so if MSI have got something in the works, then undoubtedly everybody else does. Whether it's restricted purely to manufacturers who manufacture both the motherboards and graphics cards, I don't know yet.
That seems like horribly unbelievable, right? 4 seconds from power on to Windows desktop? Is that what they're implying?
Yeah. That's what I was told over the phone.
That's not boot to the... You're counting boot to when the Windows logo starts throbbing, though, I thought you said.
Yeah, so my test is to when the Windows logo starts, because after that, then you're sort of dictated by software rather than hardware, which is technically not what I'm testing. But this is what I was told by MSI.
Gotcha.
2 to 4 seconds from power on to Windows. For Windows 8, if you're at Windows 7, I was told... This was a very brief sort of 60-second discussion about it, because the guy I was speaking to was actually on the roadside with a broken down car.
Okay, so he was under duress, right? Like, that's not I don't know if we should take those benchmarks validly.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see what comes in and how it works.
It's very ironic. The call was quick, and we're discussing very quick boot times.
That's terrible.
It essentially means, given the way that modern monitors work, you press the start button, then your computer will boot into Windows quicker than your monitor initializes to show a screen.
I wanted to test that back when I was doing this, back when I was displays editor, is that was always my biggest... I couldn't care less. Well, I do care about the color thing, but the performance getting into whether I could even see the BIOS post, that was always just ridiculous, and I wanted to measure it.
Yes, with my post times, I use one of the cheap Korean 27-inch monitors, and that thankfully shows a little bit of the post and then the Windows Start logo, so my timings can be fairly more accurate.
You have the Achieva?
I have the Cat Leap.
Oh, weird. My Cat Leap doesn't show my X58 EVGA BIOS. Like, I just see the Windows logo throbbing.
So it also depends on what graphics card you're using and the BIOS on the graphics card as well.
This is what I was told.
Interesting. Yeah. I want that updated then.
It kind of makes sense that you have to have something additional on the graphics card to help with that. I mean,
does anybody else do what I do and just disable all the extra controllers that aren't used but get initialized to make the post faster? That's step one.
When I first started doing this testing, that was the first thing that was mentioned in the comments. Can you do another set of tests with it stripped out of all the extra controllers? And for most boards, especially most of the high-end boards, it doesn't make that much of a difference. But if I'm looking at my graph here, if I take the EVGA Z77 FTW board, normal post in 19.5 seconds, but a strict post in 11.2.
Yeah, that's a pretty big gain.
Yeah, that is a really big gain.
I know that some of the Marvell controllers can take an extra 3, 4, 5 seconds to initialize on top of the post sequence.
Yeah, it's all their SATA stuff, and then they do their boot from Ethernet polling, and then just all this stuff that I'm never going to use.
The EVGA board was quite nice because it had an option which was extreme overclockers option, which essentially took out all the extra controllers.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So one thing I've always wondered about, actually, we've been very, very focused about reducing post times on PCs. I'm curious, Brian, and actually Vivek, you too, how much does that matter, or just overall boot from scratch time, how much does that matter to you guys on the phone side?
It's obviously, I don't know, it's much better than it used to be when I was testing RIM phones.
Yeah, they had
BlackBerries
Palm
take
Pre.
too long.
Does anybody remember Palm Pre? The boot time there, you can just Like I bought a Veer, and then I turned it on. Like I bought a Veer like 2 months ago. I just like felt this strange need to buy a Veer, and they're on Amazon really cheap. And the first thing I did when I powered it on, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this, because it was like 5 minutes later. Like I went and like checked my mail, like cleaned up the kitchen, just like sat on the couch, like mused about my life for a bit, came back and it was still booting.
Reminds me of the HTC Hero.
So I had to reset an HP touchpad. Like,
oh god,
factory reset it. It took forever. Like, it was like I could have reinstalled Windows on my laptop or desktop or even a netbook by that time.
Well, so that's why I'm like, this always bothers me whenever I have to like actually reset a phone. I'm like, this takes longer than my desktop. This is ridiculous. But Brian, I'm curious about you. Does that matter at all to you?
Oh yeah, definitely. It matters to me because I'm always popping the Sims in and out, and you have to usually do a battery pull. Yeah. But I don't know, most of the devices that I test these days, like the flagship Android phones, they're way under a minute. Like it's a matter of seconds. It's been a long time since I've been like, this is unacceptably long. You know, like RIM always had boot times that are minutes. Like, yeah. And same with, and Palm never got the boot chain right. Like I wrote about this in one of the reviews. It's just like, if you go look at, this has been fairly well documented too, is that they never had the resources to get that under control. Like they never fired their timers right when you're booting the kernel, so it would just time out. All the steps were timeouts.
So when a phone is booting, what exactly is it initializing?
Well, everything. It's just like a PC. I mean, that's the thing. There's nothing different there.
I'm debating which has more to initialize, either a phone or a fully laden desktop.
And well, see, the thing with the desktop is that it sounds like they're always searching for what's new. Like the Marvell controller is always trying to see, like, have they attached another serial ATA device?
Yeah. Right?
And it sounds like the optimization that they did is that they're just going to assume that it's unchanged. You know, like in the fast boot you were just talking about, they just assume, is it the same state? Sure, then just boot. So on a phone, it's not like I'm going to be hot plugging drives ever. Most of I mean, like it's... You know what I'm saying? So that's the optimization they're able to do.
Well, that's the thing. On a phone, none of the hardware changes every time. So the boot, when you initialize everything, it should be fine. With when it comes down to certain controllers on PC space, it rather than it being sort of is anything new, it's just a fixed initialization sequence, whether anything's new or nothing's changed. I think with this new fast booting stuff, there is the potential of either it's saying everything's the same, therefore everything can be up in 4 seconds, or it's doing a sort of semi-delayed tactic, whereby it lets you access to screen all the vital components, and then over the next 20 seconds, things like the network kick in, additional SATA controllers, hopefully if you're not booting from them, or something similar like that. There's a million different ways that they could do this. But with a phone, what are you going to change? The SIM card, the SD card?
Well, again, they do. There's a thing in Android that basically boils down to, it's similar to hibernation. They save the states. You know, I mean, personally, again, I don't think that Android...
So is that a NAND speed that it's being delayed by?
It's gated by? Probably. Like, most of the time they've done, I see really good optimizations for... Like, again, I can't think of a single time in the past even like 3 years that I've looked at an Android phone and thought, wow, I wish this booted faster. You know, like it was always the OEMs that just had problems in general that boots really slowly. And again, I think it's just a function of there's nothing ever changing there. It's fixed, and it's not mutable. You know, like there's I can't remember the name of the setting in Android. I'm spacing out on it. But this is a pretty common thing to ship turned on, and it makes boot faster, but has some issues with certain apps. Like you'll see a setting that dictates this.
On HTC, I think it's fast boot, right? It's just called fast boot or something.
Well, there's fast boot, which is a protocol for what's it a protocol for? It's like when you do ADB fast boot, it's a way to just like flash stuff over USB. that's one thing. But I think there is another thing that's fast boot as well. But yeah, I don't know. It's a tangential thing. I mean, I think your question, Ian, is that yeah, there's the optimization is because the phone is never changing. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get fully, it isn't on by the time you get into the launcher. Like you can still be searching for Wi-Fi signals, still be finishing your baseband.
But yeah, after 40 seconds from pressing the power button for a phone, I'd expect it all to be done by then.
So I think
it's booting a PC.
I think part of what you're seeing is, one, you touched on it, a lot of these phones use like bargain basement pricing eMMC controllers that are just terrible. Then there's the interface from eMMC to the SoC itself. Then there's the fact that a lot of these ARM cores in the grand scheme of things just aren't very good, right? Like they're just not fast.
Yeah.
So like I mean it's the same thing, right? We've noticed the impact of CPU speed on PC boot times over the past 10 years.
But that's booting from post to OS.
Yeah, but in the phone we're talking about that as well, right?
Yeah, I guess.
So it's I mean, you have to look at it this way. The NAND in a phone is basically like an order of magnitude slower than the SSD in a PC, right? Like it's even slower than a hard drive in most tests. So there's just a ton of room for improvement there. And then just the cores suck. Like they're just not good. Like they've been getting better, which is great. Like I'm glad we're moving forward, but we're still batting well below average, right? Like it's just not acceptable at this point. What's interesting to me is on the PC side, it sounds very much like this is a platform problem, right? Like that you mentioned MSI came to you and said, hey, we've got a new BIOS with a video card with a new BIOS, and the combination of the two can result in this like ultra fast boot time. And I think what we'll need to see if we really want to address this as a problem is kind of this holistic platform solution where Marvell and everyone who takes up space on a board that's going to have a role during post has to get together and say, look, you can't just waste 5 seconds doing whatever the hell you want to do, right? Like you have to, you're given 200 milliseconds, you do your work and then be done because we need to make things better.
I can't remember the model that MSI told me. It may have been a mid to low range, so there may not actually be any additional anything beyond the standard Intel chipset.
Yeah,
but I mean, don't quote me on that.
That's a Windows 8 thing, though. I mean, like the whole Windows, like everybody talks about. We even talked about Windows 8. Everybody's sort of just apprehensively waiting for it. But the real good Windows 8 things are stuff like this: emphasis on making the desktop and the PC space more like a phone in regards to booting, in regards to resources, in regards to power, in regards to standby, etc., etc., etc.
The thing is, you're going to see this mostly on new systems because I don't think a lot of people will be quite comfortable updating a BIOS of a current graphics card in their machine.
Yeah, I mean, that's
which is unfortunate.
The utilities are there, but they're not easy utilities to use.
Yeah, at the same time, I would update my 680 BIOS if I could get a couple seconds shaved off and maybe see the like post flyby on the cat leap. I would do that, yeah, in a second.
Maybe I'm the wrong person to ask because I spend most of my time in sleep or hibernate.
Yeah.
What, you mean you spend most of your personal time in sleep or hibernate, or with the computer in sleep or hibernate?
Both.
Okay.
Both. The only time I end up turning machines off is if I need to update hardware or if I'm doing overclock testing.
The only time I turn everything off is for the weekly podcast so that there's no background noise.
I'm constantly turning things because I'm always plugging in a different CPU or like a PCIe SSD or something. Like it's just. I remember the first time Intel told me when they first did, what was it, Pentium 4 Extreme Edition? They brought me into this hotel room and they're like, oh, we have something special to show you. And they showed me, Pentium 4 Extreme Edition. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And there were a bunch of Intel engineers in the room. And I remember asking one of them, I'm like, hey, I got a question for you. mean time between failures on your socket? Because I must swap it in and out. I don't know, maybe 100 times a month. And at that point, I think I was just doing a lot of CPU testing. And the number they gave me was really low, right? Like it was in the like 12 to 20 range. And I always wonder now whether I'm just hitting MTBF on insertions whenever I have like a funky problem with one of my test platforms.
Was that ZIF or LGA though?
That I don't remember.
Wasn't that
the first
LGA
socket?
by that time?
The pins are on the processor, yeah.
Yeah, I think the first Pentium 4 Extreme Edition was that. I honestly I don't remember.
I thought that was LGA 775 by that
Yeah, I
time.
can't
it would
remember.
be. Yeah.
But
Oh, actually, yeah, no, you're right.
Well, I think LGA should be a bit better. I mean, that's the MOBO.
I've
That's their problem.
I've used processors, in testing and in overclocking repeatedly in and out of boards, probably in triple figures for some of the processors that I have. I've never come across issues.
See, I always have the issue where, a motherboard that's been my test platform for like 2 years, I dust it off and try to use it for something normal, like, hey, this is just going to go into a machine now, and it just has the most ridiculous problems at that point. Like, even though it has run Sysmark for years, I put it in a normal system, after being idle for a few months, and then it's shot to hell. It's like horrible. And I always kind of blame that on, well, I must have just tripped up MTBF on something.
Do you believe in the static demon?
I do believe in the static demon.
So do you wear a wrist strap?
Rarely. It's
interesting. What about staticide? Do you have staticide?
I don't have staticide. I wear the strap if it's something that I can't easily get a replacement of, right? So like, if I were to get a Haswell platform right now, I would take lots of precautions. If someone sends me a Lano motherboard and they're like, run 5 numbers on it, I don't care.
So I used to be the ESD officer at a place that did semiconductor processing, and I have to admit, I don't believe in the static bad guy for
Really?
the right things. Unless you're dealing with tiny, I mean, like, what is... I could go on but for most things, it's okay.
The hardware I play with for overclocking means that everything just gets thrown around. Well, not thrown, but...
You should wear a gown. That would be awesome, like, dress wear. Like, I used to have to wear an ESD safe, like, gown every day.
With footies and everything?
You should put that on. No, not with footies. No, it was just like a gown, with, like, basically conductive elements sewn into the fabric.
Yeah.
And like metal ties, and then you would plug yourself into the table, and the table was ESD safe. The chair was ESD safe. We had an ESD safe trash can, which doesn't make sense if you think about it, but it was hilarious.
I've got a tiger suit, but they're normally pajamas.
Ah, okay.
Probably create more static.
So the other thing that happened in the PC space is I finally, a week late, published the Haswell article, which I guess, has everyone read it by now, or you can just pretend you read it? Because I know it was long.
I read it.
I woke up at 9 o'clock and 9:30 I was still reading.
That's good. I appreciate that. I think we've already discussed Haswell kind of to death at this point. I don't know if any of you guys had anything you wanted to add or discuss on the podcast regarding it.
The main issue I have, given what you said all in the article, it all boils down to me to the 5 to 15% performance increase. Intel will want people to move from Sandy Bridge, and if all you get is 5 to 15%, I don't think they will.
That makes sense. So the one thing that never added up to me is if this like embedded DRAM option is going to be an option, or can also be accessed by the CPU. 5 to 15% seems rather small.
Yes.
But I don't know specifics, right? Like even the 5 to 15%, that's not officially disclosed by Intel yet, as is the embedded DRAM and stuff like that. And I even saw on Twitter some people were saying, hey, 5 to 15% for a talk isn't that impressive. And I don't know, maybe I'm just jaded. I felt like, if you talk 5 to 15%, overall performance improvement, let's say 10% on average, potentially a lot higher if you got FMA apps or some of the crypto stuff that they're doing. I think it's reasonable when you couple it with just the insane amount of improvements on the power side. But
that's what I was going to say. That's the big exciting part.
Yeah, I mean, obviously for ultra mobile, it's super exciting if they can really pull off this, greater than 20x reduction in idle power. Vivek, the one thing that was going through my mind is when you told me that you were doing like the iPad as a notebook experiment, and you talked about how it's just, you could see that you had 50% battery life left on the iPad, and that was still going to last you, more than just the rest of the day versus, just a couple of hours. And this idea of being able to have that in a real like beefy notebook as well is just really compelling to me as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, because I saw that a couple of people were saying that they were pretty disappointed by the performance thing, the 5 to 15%, and I was like, shouldn't it be about performance per watt kind of thing, right? Especially with the idle, because what?
No, not if you're a performance hound.
Okay.
And so technically, idle power improvements don't factor into performance per watt, right? That's just more energy over time, because your performance when idle is 0 anyways.
Right. Oh. Okay. Yeah. All right. Sorry, I was thinking.
And
about
Intel didn't actually talk about active power. So I've seen what the final TDPs are for Haswell. The TDPs do go up versus Ivy Bridge. Not talking about the 10-watt stuff. They do go up, and given 2x floating point throughput and all of the additional ALUs that are there and like execution units, active power is definitely going to be higher. I don't know if this means we're going to get like Sandy Bridge style notebooks where it's just kind of burning your lap, or if it'll be worse, or if it'll be somewhere in between. But like that's the idle stuff's definitely going to improve, but worst case active power is definitely going up.
I mean,
so it's just the same story again, more dynamic range.
Yes. No, it's unfortunate. Like that's just what it is now, right? Like the days of you being able to get everything have been over for quite a while, right? Now it's improving power and performance characteristics in certain environments, and really.
I don't see what there's no problem with that. I don't think 10 to 15 is worth complaining about.
I guess people look at, so if we look at all the talks, right? So Conroe, Nehalem, Sandy Bridge, and then Haswell. Conroe was, 20 to 50% or 20 to 40%? But that's because Penny 4 was really bad. Nehalem was pretty small, right? Nehalem was, I think we said 0 to 40%. And the 40% gains were because of hyperthreading or what have you. Sandy Bridge was about 20-ish on average. So depending on how you look at it, it could be in line with what we've seen from Intel talks in the past, or maybe a little bit on the low side.
I guess the proof will be in the pudding, as in how it feels at the end of the day.
So the other thing I heard is that Haswell ramp is going to be kind of slow. We saw Ivy Bridge, everyone looked at it and said, hey, this is clearly a mobile focused part. Haswell's going to be very mobile focused, and I've heard the desktop ramp numbers for Q2 next year are very conservative. So I think Ivy Bridge is actually going to have a longer lifespan than we originally thought.
Sorry, what do you mean by a ramp? As in releasing certain
wafer
parts
starts?
First?
So ramp in terms of percentage of Intel's total shipments per quarter.
Right.
Right. So that's always the metric you look at when how quickly Intel's pushing out a new processor architecture. How quickly does it get to like 25% of all CPU shipments, or 50, or close to 100% or whatever. And I'm hearing low single digits in Haswell desktops during the quarter of its launch, and a little bit of improvement later, but it's really more of like a late Q3, Q4 thing before we start seeing significant volume move to Haswell in kind of traditional form factors.
They've still got a year to be able to manage the stocks as and when they want to release it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, that's the other thing that like I have to keep reminding myself. And I kind of hinted at this in the conclusion, right? That Intel is talking in great detail, like number of execution ports and size of UOP caches, like all of this stuff about an architecture that's not going to ship for 9 months. And Brian, you and I have to like beg for details in any other chip that we cover in the mobile space.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Right?
so people, yeah, I think, yeah, people in the PC space are spoiled. That's what that's what I would say. Most of what we encounter is either just through digging or asking that one person who knows, or like Samsung doesn't even have a website with most of these details.
You have to wait until consolidation.
Yeah,
Well, and even then, we'll see. Like I think like we've gotten a lot out of Qualcomm. They're pretty comfortable dealing with us and talking about details. But even then, there are things we still like that you and I know that we still can't talk about, and everybody's.
it's never going to be made public.
A function of just how fast it's evolving and competitive the landscape is.
I mean, the amount of stuff you have to physically dig to find out is insane. Because like even with AMD, I can just like fire off an email and I'll get an answer. But Brian's like slaving over in a corner, like trying to devise ways to hack firmware to understand what's going on.
Yeah, I mean I'm okay with that, and it's it's fun. I enjoy that sort of stuff, but yeah, I wish I could just send an email. I mean, we're not there yet, right? I don't want to. There's no one to blame. It's just we're not there yet, and I think there's a lot of pushback still, with people sort of not recognizing that people want to shop for a phone like that.
Yeah,
or at least analyze / look at it that way. I don't know why there is, but it's not like more knowledge is going to be worse.
Yes.
And I don't think your average consumer is going to go in and buy a phone with an Intel sticker or a Qualcomm sticker still, but it's still there. So we'll see.
So before we move on, any other questions or thoughts on Haswell?
Why isn't it here yet?
Why isn't it? I mean, the Ivy Bridge just launched, right? They have to.
Yeah, I still don't have an Ivy Bridge, right?
Yeah,
I'm still on Linfield,
you sent one
guys.
just now. Oh my god. Well, I'm on Gulftown on the. See, I want my 10 core. Why can't I have my 10 core?
So I think your 10 core. No, so the 10 core Ivy Bridge EX for servers is going to be 10 cores, right?
I have a couple of the 8 core Sandy Bridge E Xeons.
Okay,
I want that.
Well, they don't overclock, so I'm not happy.
Well, I don't really care about how far I can push it overclocking. I just want it.
You just want to see Task Manager having 16 or 32 of those little bars going up and down.
Absolutely.
But because they're Xeon parts, you're $2,500 each.
Well, unless I can somehow snag a review unit, or just I don't know, come up with a good excuse for why I need one.
Yeah, for obvious phone testing.
Engineering samples.
Yeah, for running the Android emulator. God, that thing is slow.
You can always test one of those. I don't know if you saw this from. I'm sure you did the day 3 of IDF, where they talked about the virtualized base stations.
Yes, that's a big thing. That's awesome too. That stuff is so exciting. I wish talk about a market that, we think the SoC and the phone space is hard to get info on. I challenge you to go find what's in a base station.
Yeah.
Right? You can't, we know what's in a base station. Just a lot of ARM cores, and then just tons of DSP. And, sometimes you'll see Xeons, and then they're just running software that Alcatel / this is the other thing. It's all software defined radio.
Yeah.
So you see these people are oh no, are they gonna have to change the X or Y? No, it's software defined. Come on, this is 2012. But yeah, so that's just tons of cores. So I want my tons of cores.
So for people who didn't follow, the idea there is, instead of having all of this kind of custom proprietary hardware and your cell towers or cell base stations, you would virtualize the software and run it on basically just Xeons in a data center, and then reduce the amount of kind of on-site hardware that you have, put all of that in data centers, and then have them load balance across all of your cell sites, right? So now if you have one cell site that's, let's say, active during half the day and really idle during the other half, and you've got another cell site 300 miles somewhere else that has the kind of opposite usage, you can now have one server that kind of handles everything, and the end users never really notice. And this was a big deal. I think they had China Mobile on stage, where they were just talking about deploying this in China and how it's just such a big deal because they have so many mobile phone users there.
It's a really awesome optimization technique too, because then you just send the IQ data. I believe that's what I believe they have the transceiver still at the cell site, and then they just literally send IQ data over fiber, and then that shows up at your your base station thing, your virtualized instance.
Isn't
this is
latency
pretty common.
an issue?
No, I mean you're going to incur that latency anyways, right? Like there's no free gains here.
Well, yeah, no, just sending all this data back and forth over fiber. I mean, you're limited by the speed of light, so.
No, but
you're limited by the speed of light, but you're also limited by the process. Like the electrical processing is always going to be more than just raw propagation. And then in this case, it's probably even lower because there are interfaces between the node, base stations or enode Bs. And if you're talking to a box next to you or inside of a VM, so like what's the network interface look like? It's just literally the VM talking to another VM. It's probably going to be even lower as opposed to I'm going to have to talk out over this microwave backhaul link or go talk across, Ethernet or like a local ring fiber to the other enode B. Like when you're doing a handover, like imagine a handover, I have to pass all the state table information. Like this is a big thing. I don't think people appreciate in GSM, WCDMA, and LTE. It's all the state table stuff is done on the base station, as opposed to like the US way of doing things with CDMA, which is like it's just a router. Like I just ask for things and I get them. Whereas in WCDMA, like the phone is just sort of this accessory, and all the thinking is done on the network. Like when am I going to hand over? So yeah, putting all that stuff in a data center is just a huge, like, awesome strategy.
And the other benefit is obviously now you move. I mean, because obviously Intel wants to put this on Xeons, which are expensive, but I'm guessing that those platforms end up being a lot cheaper than the kind of proprietary custom hardware that you get from everyone that supplies into the base station space.
Well, what was it that TI was saying? They have like 90% market share in this space. They have like just a million A15s, or previously was like a million A9s, and then DSPs.
Interesting. I mean, I wouldn't doubt it, right? Like, it's just when you can switch to commodity PC hardware that there's already tons of that exist, I feel like that always does wonders for cost.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't doubt that for a second.
I read an interesting article way back, it's a couple of years old now. The advantages of improving hardware versus hiring programmers to improve efficiency. It basically said, stage 1, throw better hardware at it. If that doesn't work, stage 2, hire programmers.
I mean, that's totally how we ended up in this whole mess we're in today, right? Where that's all we did. We just threw better hardware at the problem for 20 years, and then we ended up with like a really inefficient hardware stack and then really inefficient OSs on top of that. And that's why we have this, kind of ARM mobile OS resurgence that happened. And that's why everyone, Intel on the architecture side and Microsoft on the OS side have been kind of like backtracking and adding in efficiency and a focus on things that they honestly just didn't focus on for so long.
How many cycles does it take from clicking the start button to make the start menu appear? Is it on the order of like thousands?
Oh, way more than that, right? It was a ridiculous number of instructions just to like have the start menu open up.
So that's how bloated this whole we'll just throw more hardware at it indefinitely thing has gotten us.
Yeah. And now, unfortunately, I'm afraid we're just going to correct in the wrong direction, right? Where we just go, yeah, everything's good enough. That's fine. Let's just focus on software. But I guess that's
I mean, if that's the optimization for a while, then when we start throwing more hardware at it, it's going to be that much better.
That's true.
A flip-flop or a TikTok. Wait, somebody already does that.
Or that's the problem with pendulum swings, right? I don't like the swing part. I like the nice, happy part in the middle. So last thing we want to talk about on the PC side is, Vivek, you just finished up the 2nd gen Razer Blade notebook review. How did that go? Actually, I haven't. I was in Haswell land all this week, so I haven't even looked at what your final take was on it.
Yeah, so basically it's very similar on the outside to the first Blade. They just really significantly upgraded the internals. Like the first generation Blade was, they called it a gaming notebook, but it had a dual core. It didn't have a GTX class GPU. It was not fast, or it wasn't as fast as it should have been, considering they priced it at $2,800 or something. It was very near $3,000, and they were like, yeah, it's the world's first gaming notebook, and it was like a dual core, and just like we were like, come on guys, like, yes, it's beautiful, but no, come on. The second gen gets with Ivy Bridge and Kepler, they just went with a 35-watt quad and GTX 660M. So, it's just significantly more competitive internals, and they dropped the price too. So,
what is it priced at now?
It's now $2,500, which
okay.
is still expensive, but it's it's within the same range as like an M17X, well loaded, like an Alienware, is right around there. Like the 2,000 to 2,500 range, depending on what GPU you want. The only problem is now the GTX 660 it's almost the same as the GT 550M, right? So like they just got stuck in the wrong NVIDIA cycle. NVIDIA went Kepler up to 660, and then for the 680, and only this week have they kind of released the mid high end Kepler mobile parts with like the GTX 670 and 675 MX. So this one's kind of it's on the entry level of gaming range performance, at least in terms of what we expect from 17-inch systems, but it's, I guess, got the style and the form factor that it kind of justifies the price tag a lot more than the last one did.
Interesting. So it's still the if you care about the kind of tangibles with your notebook, and the display's good on it, I'm assuming.
Yes, it's not an IPS display, but it's an AUO 17.3-inch 1080p. Contrast ratio ended up being just about 800:1, and the color gamut was essentially sRGB. So it's pretty much as good as you can get without going for an IPS panel.
Okay. Would you buy it? Would you recommend this thing?
Yes. If you're looking for, out and out performance, you have to go with something with a GTX 680M, right? Like there's no other options there. But
so,
yeah,
I'm looking at some of the gaming benchmarks, and it seems that 1080 it struggles to get 60 frames a second on especially a lot of the newer titles in like the past 12-24 months.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely didn't get anywhere near 60 3. On most of it. I think because I was talking in like the 30 range. I think it on enthusiast level, like at 1080p, it was easily 30 on everything except for Battlefield 3, if I remember right.
Yeah, it really struggled there.
Yeah.
See, I'm used to testing processor graphics, right? You guys are talking about numbers that I never see anymore. It's just if it's above 13:7 and getting more than maybe 20 frames a second at high quality settings, I'm just blown away. Like that's just amazing performance to me.
Like I guess
is it weird that the most exciting thing about this for me is that they put the trackpad to the right of the keyboard, which is the way it should be.
Yeah, no,
and it's got that awesome LCD under it. Like for gaming, it should be to the right. It should not be underneath.
No, it's great, and actually, just in day-to-day use, it's so much more natural than having it underneath the keyboard.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing how usable that is.
Because otherwise you have to sit far behind the notebook to and you get this weird thing where one arm, you're like chicken winging your laptop, like one arm is really canted, the other one isn't.
But here's the thing: if you're not used to it, you really like. Jared absolutely hates the mouse layout. He's like, this is senseless. And I'm like, no, that's
see for me. Just looking at it, this looks perfect.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing about the Blade. Even though by the numbers, it's never going to be kind of better than the Clevos or the Alienwares. It's just nicer to use. Also, it only weighs 6.5 pounds, so I actually want to carry it, right? Like, it's in the range where that's good enough. I'll carry that. Whereas the M7,
it seems like they nailed what they're good at. You're saying, I mean, like the keyboard looks awesome, the mouse looks awesome, the chassis looks awesome.
Yeah.
Does that weight include the power supply?
Power supply adds another 3/4 of a pound. The power supply is actually really, really small. It's smaller than It's smaller than my. Yeah.
It's coping with what, 95 watts or 60? Because the processor's 35.
It's 120 watt PSU, or 120 watt AC adapter. And I think the system was the CPU is 35, the GPU was 45, and I think it was topping out at close to 100 and 105 maybe, a little bit less. If you're really hitting CPU and GPU, it does not charge quickly.
But it doesn't do like the MacBook and then just draw from battery and lie to you about it?
No, it does not do that. That I actually checked to confirm. It does not do that.
That's good. I love when mine does that.
Dude, that's Sandy Bridge, man. I'm still shocked that you can cram nearly 1 billion transistors of, very high performing silicon into some of the chassis that these go into.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. My complaint is I want bigger power supply. Like they just didn't spec it out right.
Yes.
What is the Apple part? Like what's the wattage on that?
I believe it's 65, or maybe 65? It's 90. I'm sorry, 90 watts.
90 sounds more right. I think mine was a 65. I had a 13-inch though, so I never had any issues.
Maybe it's 95. Don't quote me on it. I don't want to get a bunch of emails saying I'm wrong. Like, this is me just like off the cuff.
So I think everyone should be writing emails to Brian right now as you hear this.
I already started.
Like, this is something I should have known. Oh, it's 85. Okay. Yeah. Which is clearly not enough because, like, it'll just draw, like, the PMIC will just draw from the battery, Like, you'll see not charging and then the number going down when I'm encoding videos. This is why I hate videos. This is like why I don't do videos. And then it just is going down and it's just like chewing through my battery.
The solution would be for quick sync support to be universal, but of course that's apparently too much to ask.
Yeah, the pixels look too different from the well, I like that section in the Haswell thing where you were like, apparently it'll take another generation before we get to x86 quality video encode.
Yeah, so the problem is...
I don't mean to sidetrack, but that was interesting.
Well, because there's a bunch of stuff that I can't say publicly, but it's my understanding that we are not going to get a lot of the open source support for QuickSync-like stuff until Broadwell.
Because it doesn't meet their quality standards?
I don't know. I mean, that's entirely up to like the folks working on the projects to kind of comment on. But
weird.
And I'm really upset about it because, and I told Intel this, I'm like, you can't just keep telling me to buy another one and it's going to get better, right? Like the feature's been here since 2011. You can't tell me to wait to 2014 for it to be good enough where I'm actually going to see it used in applications that aren't made by Cyberlink, right? Like,
and they keep revving it so quickly that I don't know what things are anymore.
I mean, I'm glad that we're seeing iterative improvements. Like that was one of the takeaways from looking at Haswell, in that even if you complain about the 5 to 15% gains in single thread performance, you know what? If that's what they're guaranteeing this year, and you see it again, maybe you see 5 to 10 next year, and then another 5 to 15 the year after that, you'll look back, over the past 3 or 4 years, and you'll see actually, more evolutionary or revolutionary like performance improvements. And that's one of the reasons Intel is where it is today in the x86 CPU space. And it's good to see that they're doing the same thing with QuickSync, right? Like they just make it faster every generation. My big thing is they're Intel, you know, they bought McAfee. They can get ISVs to use this, but it's just not happening. And I still haven't found it in Mountain Lion. I stopped looking. I don't even know if anyone else has found it at this point.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal is. You know, like I think there are a lot of people who spend too much time worrying about just a very tiny difference in PSNR.
Yes.
You know, and the other thing that blows my mind too is, you know, like YouTube uses the oldest possible version of x264. So it looks like garbage, you know. No, it does. Like YouTube x264 is literally ancient because they wrote it one time to just like scale really well over what they had.
Yeah.
And it's been this immutable object that looks like garbage ever since.
And that's the
thing.
What
they should do is just go to x264 and be like, just optimize all your SIMD for just like, here's some handwritten assembly that's great with AVX. I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, and we've seen kind of like AMD passed around AVX builds of x264, and there were some, you know, improvements in performance there. I just like the whole, you know, you still have 0 to 10% CPU utilization while you're encoding at 400 frames a second thing. Like that's very nice.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can rant about.
I didn't mean to
QuickSync.
sidetrack Vivek off of the Razer Blade.
So Razer Blade sounds cool. Any other thoughts or conclusions from your perspective, Vivek, on it?
If you're looking for a gaming notebook that looks good and is still portable, I mean, it's the only 17-inch system right now that I'd consider portable now that the 17-inch MacBook Pro no longer exists. Because it's really the only one that's less than 7 pounds now. But yeah, other than that, it's pretty similar to the old one. They fixed some stuff with like the LCD trackpad. It actually works now. And
it seems like it's kind of a status symbol too, I would think. I mean, it's definitely a high-end, like, if you bring this to a gaming LAN, everybody's in a ooh and ah. Whereas if you just like show up with, I mean, that's right. I mean, people like to buy things because it's a status symbol, right? You know?
No. We laugh at.
We laugh at those people.
For a LAN, you have to bring a proper bulky machine.
Sure, but if I go to a cafe and I whip out the Razer Blade, like that's gonna get some attention, right? Like people want attention.
Yeah, you get attention, but here's the thing, right? The problem with using the Razer Blade at like a Starbucks is that the laptop itself is physically larger than the table you're putting on. It's not gonna fit on the little
table.
Yeah, because the tables are so small. Yeah,
but that's
awesome.
Now. People always go to cafes to be seen, though. That's the thing, you know. Like, rarely is it I just want to go there and just. I mean, like I go there just to work or write to get out of the office, but people like to be seen, I think. And if you showed up with one of these bad boys, people would be like, "Whoa, what is that?"
So at various
sometimes
points in
probably
time,
not in a good way, but maybe.
I was using both the Blade, the first Blade, and a 17-inch MacBook Pro. I was
at the same time.
Yeah, I was doing some coding assignments, and I went to meet up with a friend at Starbucks, and I was doing the coding on the 17-inch MacBook Pro, and then I was also doing some benchmarking on the Blade, and we took up like 2 or 3 tables, right? Because I just
that is awesome.
Because I had these array of laptops. It was awful. It was like
there's this one guy who goes to the cafe I go to, and he brings along a desktop LCD every time. So I keep wanting to like outdo him and bring my exoskeleton PC and the Achieva, and just like plop it down there and just like, yeah, I've got a full on desktop, like just deal with it.
Spend a day in
You've seen the pictures of guys
Not
that bring
Starbucks,
iMacs,
though.
right, to Starbucks?
I see that all the time. Like I say, people go to Cartel with just like their desktop, or like I used to bring 2 notebooks sometimes, but nothing huge.
Brian,
were 2 notebooks and 6 phones?
Yeah.
Were you with me when someone brought an iMac to the press room at something?
Yes, yeah, I was with you. That was at Mobile World Congress. That was Mobile World Congress. I remember we were like, where's the press room? Let's go find it.
Yeah.
And it was like early morning. It was like 6 a.m. or something, because the starts there are just like absurdly early, like 8 a.m. everything starts.
Yeah.
And we went to the press room and it's like packed and just full of people like eating everything. And there's this dude who's got his iMac in a box. Like he brought the box. Like actually pretty smart. Like he probably shipped the box with the iMac inside, and he just like got this out on the press room, like hooked up.
And it was the 27-inch iMac, right? This wasn't the small one.
Yeah,
Jeez.
and I was like, I don't understand, like how is this working? Like, does he go to meetings with that?
What's that? Is that like £20 worth of kit weight?
He had everything, but I
Had
mean,
to
of
be
course,
more.
it fits in the styrofoam, like it fits in the box. You
It's
know,
It's bizarre. I
so
don't get
maybe
it.
like we're making fun of it, but maybe I'm just jealous. You know, like this guy's like, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm bringing my iMac this time. Like I need to encode my videos faster.
Any last words on the PC side before we move into tablets and then phones?
Yeah, the Blade, it comes with mechanical hard drive plus 64 gig of solid state storage in a caching SSD. If I was going to spend $2,500 on a gaming notebook, I'd probably want an SSD in there.
So the first one came with a 256 gig SSD, and I actually kind of went off at Razer's CEO about this. I was like, why? Why would you do this, right? Like, because the SSD last time was good, right? And so they went with he was like, yeah, well, games these days are too big. We were getting users that were complaining about not being able to fit enough games on 256 gigs, which I actually kind of understood because our entire mobile gaming suite is a little bit over 100 gigs, right? So, and that's only like 7 games. So if someone had like, you know, maybe like 12 games or something like that, that's, you know, 150 gigs almost. But I just didn't think that 500 gig mechanical hard drive plus caching was the way to go. I thought that if they had gone for something like 128 gig MSATA boot drive and then had like a 750 gig hard drive on the side as just like storage, that would have worked a lot better.
So when you buy this notebook, does it come with like Steam installed?
I don't think that it doesn't come with anything except for Razer Synapse pre-installed. Like there's
because the way to get around this, I mean, I'm a Steam user. I have 180 odd games on Steam. So if it actually came with Steam installed, with Steam on the mechanical hard drive, you just go, okay, I'll download those games and never worry about storage, but you still have the SSD performance for booting and general OS.
Yeah, I mean, so boot performance actually went down by more than what I thought it would. They're using Envelo's Dataplex. It's not Intel's Smart Response caching scheme. So
sorry.
What?
I mean, it's just SSD caching, like, you know.
Well, there's no way to do it on this chipset though.
No, it doesn't matter. They should just stop. Like, the minute you're at the boardroom and you're like, oh, I think we should have SSD caching, you just need to be fired. Like, just leave the building and then go work in another industry. Because, I mean, I can maybe understand it if you're like, oh, I want to make a $600 notebook with an SSD in it. I understand. It's like $2,500, dude. No, I don't think so. You need to put a 256 gig drive in there and then spend the $40 to put a mechanical drive in there. You know, for your mass
Yeah, it should
storage.
be big enough to hold both.
Yeah.
I would think, isn't it? Don't they have the 2 bays? This doesn't have an optical drive. So
well, this doesn't have.
You know what
2
I was
bays.
looking
This
at?
one's
It only
got-
has 2-stream Wi-Fi. They
But,
put
I
in
mean-
the 6200 series Centrino card. Like, I want 3-stream Wi-Fi.
Yeah, no, that's another good point, right? Like that is not you can't concede on that. Yeah, I don't want any compromises there. But the other thing is, Vivek, you hit the nail on the head here. Go MSATA, right? Like,
well, they did, right? It has like the caching drive it's a 64 gig MSATA. So
Yeah.
why not just make that bigger and then just install the OS on that and just have them configured as separate storage?
Exactly.
It's already configured, like it's already hardware is already there. Why
Yeah.
not just
no? Because I did this. I played with the Asus UX32 VD, which is the kind of thicker, upgradable Ultrabook that they offer.
Right, with dedicated graphics, right?
Yeah, with the discrete GPU, and it's got SSD caching. So it's got, I don't know, 24 gigs of NAND on board or something like that. And the SSD caching software they use, actually, you can go into the cache and look at hit rates. And, the hit rates are like cool. 50, they're like 50%, man. Like, that's not good. It's half the time I still get a shitty experience, right? Like, it's not, I don't know, it's not okay by me at all. And that's like fundamentally the issue with SSD caching, right? Like, you just, they're not good caches. They're just not good caches. If you had an L1 instruction cache with a 50% hit rate, that would be horrible. Right, like that's just a bad cache. So I don't know, that upsets me.
Yeah, I mean, I went off like I think I put in a solid 3 paragraphs describing why that wasn't good in my review, and I've told multiple people at Razer multiple times, including Min, and Min kind of agreed with me, but then he was kind of like, yeah, and I was like, there's not that much of an argument you can make, right? Like it's
Min, the CEO of Razer. His response was,
something along those lines. We had a longer discussion about it, but it essentially came down to just how it happened. I guess I don't know.
Friends don't let friends deploy
gaming laptop
SSD
where
caches.
You don't have an SSD, right? There's not really a good reason for it.
And I'm telling you, like this, if I know Christian's his review of the Samsung 840 using TLC NAND, like that's almost done. I think that's the solution to all of this, right? Like it's say goodbye to all the really bad SSD controllers, say goodbye to SSD caching. If you're budget constrained, you'll just deploy a TLC based drive, and you can back that up with some mechanical storage. Anyone buying a $2,500 gaming notebook knows how to manage 2 different drive letters. Like I don't think the simplicity.
I was going to say that too. Yeah, that argument is gone.
Yeah,
when you're talking about enthusiasts.
Even like normal folks, right? I see people, some guy at the Genius Bar like trying to deal with internal versus external storage. He gets it, right? This one's full. You got to put it somewhere else. Like people have closets and drawers. Like they know how that works. Like you can't put everything in
instead of folders. It's like put your folder in this filing cabinet.
Exactly, right? Like
what you need is a device where it actually gets heavier the more stuff you have on it.
Okay, that'd be horrible.
No, I'm sorry.
These analogies are just like I hope they never catch on.
So the other cool thing is I didn't actually get to mention this, but NGFF. The next generation SSD form factor, like that's actually a standard now. So that stupid gumstick proprietary thing that Apple and Asus and everyone keeps inventing, that's actually going to be a standardized form factor that people will deploy. It comes in various sizes. They'll be interchangeable. So because MSAT is kind of limited, right? It's kind of a silly form factor. It was modeled after mini PCIe cards. But NGFF will actually bring, a usable, configurable.
Is it PCIe or is it SATA?
NGFF is, I think it's SATA PCIe first, PCIe. Right? No, I don't think it's PCIe initially. Yeah, okay. So sorry. The spec is, and this is where it's kind of stupid. The spec supports either SATA, PCIe by 2, or PCIe by 4. So obviously today it would all be SATA, but eventually you would go to PCIe.
And there's also opportunity to see it on desktop or motherboards.
So yeah, you'll see it on motherboards and the desktop. The thing is, on the desktop, I think everyone's going to go to SATA Express, or what is it, SFF 8639. There's another spec standard thing for PCI Express based SSDs. But over the next 2 years, I think that's where high-end desktops will go, and then NGFF will bring a standardization in the notebook space.
The thing is, if in the desktop space, the more sort of data you want to take over PCI Express means you've got to have more pins on the CPU in order to be able to manage it. More lanes coming off, and in actual fact, the X79 refresh boards, the Gigabyte do a server board with 8 SAS ports that come off the chipset itself. And I had a discussion with them. They sent me a BIOS which allowed me to adjust the speed of those SAS ports to use PCIe Express version 1, 2, or 3.
Oh yeah, because they tested originally for stability and they just put it at the lowest one.
Yeah, but that's Intel spec lowest, because 8 SAS drives aren't really going to tax PCI Express 1. But when you get into the high-end SATA drives, they're going to really going to pull some gigabits per second through.
No, that's really
See,
cool.
that's why I want PCIe, because the SATA is just a layer of abstraction at this point for me.
Yeah, it's definitely coming, right? The issue is how do you deal with backwards compatibility, right? So like that's a major concern, because at least with SATA Express, you're supposed to be able to still plug in a SATA drive, right? Like or vice versa, right? Like that needs to be maintained. So there are a lot of concerns around that. And the bigger issue is obviously there are not even any chipsets that we've seen on the roadmap yet with SATA Express support. So it's going to be, realistically, it's going to be another year or two before we see it, which is unfortunate.
We see it through controller.
Through like an external controller is how you'll see it first before it gets integrated. But I'm super excited. I'm just excited because NGFF is like, we're going to see standardization with these, weird form factor SSDs and notebooks, which is awesome to me. The thing I challenged Intel, I was sitting down with Dadi Perlmutter at IDF, and we were talking about the lack of standardization here, and I challenged him. I was like, look, one of the things that I don't want to give up is the ability to upgrade memory, and I get that the SODIMM is it's too thick of a form factor, right? Like that can't make it as you kind of decrease Z height. So I was like, just come up with socketed ICs or something, give me the option of not having to just throw away my notebook in a couple of years, right? Like give it legs so that, if someone wanted to, they could stick on, 8 DRAM devices or something and upgrade, overall DRAM capacity. And his response was, well, do you think a lot of people would do that? And I don't know, right? Like I don't necessarily have a good answer to that, but I feel like it's something that I don't want to give up in pursuit of ultra mobility.
Yeah,
So,
I don't want to give that up either.
If you could put something in like a micro SD card in, it would instantly give you more DRAM.
Well, so I'm not even talking about that, right? Like I get the desire to solder it onto the motherboard, right? It's you want to decrease Z height. It makes a lot of sense. What I would even argue is I want a next gen SODIMM form factor, right? So something that effectively adds minimal Z height, and that doesn't protrude beyond any of the other components. So what I was even thinking is you go to socketed DRAM devices, whereas today you buy like an SODIMM, like a physical SODIMM PCB. Maybe you buy just like a bundle of 8 DRAM devices that just have LGA or some other type of socket that you just plug them into on the motherboard. You don't have to worry about heat sinks or cooling or anything like that. They're all passive. But I want something that kind of gives me the best of both worlds. I don't know. He didn't seem too enthused about the idea, but I feel like there has to be a solution here. We've had SODIMMs for what, 12 years, 13 years now, more?
Why not just move to the NGFF like format for memory, something like that?
That could work as well, right? Like the reason I said keep it on the motherboard is because people seem to already have wanted to do that, right? They're already like, hey, we're just going to stick this on the motherboard. So yeah. I want to, and asking them to, well, just come off the board again, I feel like they're just never going to do that. But if you can give them the best of both worlds, yes, you can still be on the motherboard. But if someone wants to, they can just pop these things off and pop on some faster or larger parts.
So the problem with NGFF is, how many pins have you got between the device and the board? 12?
I could run the pins on the other side is what I'm saying, on the longer side.
Right, because with SODIMM dealing with 204 pins.
Oh yeah. So sorry, Brian, you were saying run DRAM on the other side of NGFF.
Yeah, I mean, or just something like this form factor. Like the problem with SODIMM is that they put the devices on both sides. No, is NGFF both sides or just the underside?
It can,
either.
yeah, it can be both.
I think the other thing is the geometry. It seems like everybody, the notebook OEMs, have sort of adopted independent, each in their own independent scheme, a layout and a geometry that has a very tall aspect ratio. So probably that just fits in whatever, like CAD tool that they're using. They've done some optimization, and this is just like the ideal form factor.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is instead of these two, like you end up having to put two of these SODIMMs inside of your average notebook, just move to like a single card-like item that has the same weird aspect ratio as the, NGFF card format, and then solve it that way. Like, generally it looks like they just run them like parallel to where the battery is.
Yeah.
So just stick another one on the other side, and then you get a very long aspect ratio that runs across.
Yeah, that's true. That's another, like, that could totally work, right? It would give you, and to Ian's point, the trick is, well, how do you get enough IOs on that narrow little connector? Obviously, like DDR is a parallel memory bus. It's not as narrow as SATA is, but I feel like that's still a solvable problem, right?
Yeah.
Either way, I feel like no one's working on this problem, and that bothers me.
Well, don't forget memory margins, especially for desktop PC markets, are so small.
They are.
So you know what I heard? What I heard from Apple when I ran my mouth about why I didn't want a Retina MacBook Pro if it was ever going to be, here's a computer that you put in the trash when you're done with it or something breaks. Yeah. And he said that, I talked with a PM about this, and he said that the reason that they had gone to soldered on DRAM is because the mean time between failure and the failure rate is so low now that they can do this. That basically the only reason that they ever had SODIMMs to begin with was because when they were fixing computers and things were failing, it was, RAM was a common thing. And now the yields and the stability and the level of understanding about, like, here are what the errors are going to look like, and here's how common they are, that now gets weighted into their computation for what is our tolerance for this is going to be a failure point, is so low now that they're comfortable with it. So it was never a function of upgradability. Like, that was just an unintended consequence.
Interesting.
So yeah, from their point of view, it was never, we want people to upgrade the RAM. It was always, well, if you take it into the store, this is something they can do there, as opposed to you need a whole new motherboard. So I found that interesting because I hadn't thought of that before.
No, I hadn't.
And then
either.
I was like, I just want the notebook even less now. I was like, if that's your optimization, then that just makes me want it less. Like, but that was just me speaking frankly. Like, I wasn't being like pushy about it or anything.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that is the one major concerning point about the Retina MacBook Pro. Like, to me at least, is just the lack of upgradable memory, right? It's like, what happens if I decide
disposable.
I want to? Like, the good thing is they're making it minimum 8 gigs, but then it's a $2,300 computer, right? So if it didn't have 8 gigs of RAM anyways, it'd be a problem. But like, what happens if I want 16? Right? Like, it's just, you can't just scrap it for that, right?
Yeah, and that's why we need a new, like, a truly low profile, small form factor, removable DRAM standard.
Yeah, and I think
not necessarily so Apple would use it, but Intel can push it on all of its other partners.
Yeah, and I definitely think that if it were to happen, it would have to be on the board, because nobody's going to go for another separate PCB type thing. It's just because, yeah, a lot of Ultrabook manufacturers at this point are just soldering it on. It's easier and cheaper, and yeah. Yeah.
So we did our hour on all the PC stuff. I want to get to mobile. A lot has happened there. We never really talked about the new Kindles. I know, Brian, you got a Paperwhite in. What are your...
That's right.
What do you think?
About the Paperwhite? So, I mean, like, the context for this is that I was never satisfied with any of the previous Kindles. And especially not with their $50 leather accessory, like, light case thing, And I've talked about this with other people, just like my dissatisfaction with the illumination involved there. But I mean, of course, this is like colored by the fact that I've worked in the optical engineering, like related illumination problems before. Like I've worked these out, and I was like, this is just mind blowing to me that they stuck an LED behind like a little like frosted plastic thing, and then sell it to you for $50, and it's like terrible. You know, like the previous Kindles, you know, the case that you would buy, they had that like arm, like the first one like was like a ribbon cable on a plastic thing that like they had the metal set up to go to a previous angle, you know? And then the new one was like it's on an arm that swings out, so it's always in the same position. So like literally this is like a 10-minute problem in some software that will do illumination for you, you know, like Fred or ASAP. And this is what they use to design car headlights and the like projector lamps in your fancy like Audis or Lamborghinis. I wish I had projector lamps because those are so cool. But anyways, you just put in like, here's what I want to illuminate, and out pops like a Fresnel lens that you can then go get like injection molded and then stick that into your Kindle. So like it was always just like every time that I used the Kindle, I would think about this and it would just drive me into a white hot rage. Because I had paid $50 for like the world's most uneven, like it has one purpose, and that purpose is to light my page evenly so that I can read it without my eyes adjusting while I'm going from left to right, you know, and up and down all the time. So that was never done right. And now it's done right in the Paperwhite. Like they made a light pipe, and they have the LEDs at the bottom, and they shoot, you know, light through, and then they have some light guides, and it actually works great. Like I'm very pleased with it. You know, considering how uneven the previous ones this is like perfect. And so that's the long and short of it. And I always wanted to review the old Kindle, but it was just like it would have been terrible, and nobody from Amazon would have ever talked to me. Not that I ever got a review unit of any of the Kindles, or not that I got a review unit this time because I just bought it. But I don't know. The fact that storage went down. So I'm talking about the Paperwhite. Like the Kindle Fire doesn't interest me at all. Personally, I'm not interested in a forked Android thing that runs their weird web browser that we've shown time and time again does not deliver demonstrably better performance.
Has anyone, by the way, done that test on the new one?
No, of course not.
Really?
Of course not.
Like I don't.
No, nobody has.
I don't even.
So I mean, you need
out?
to do that. Yeah,
you can.
Somebody has. So we have a guy. Did he get review units of them?
I think James just shipped or something, so he's going to have it soon. But can people buy these things yet? I don't even.
Well, because I know that the 9-inch isn't shipping until like November sometime. Like it's supposed to deliver right before Thanksgiving, if I remember right. I don't know about the 7-inch though, off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't know either. Like again, honestly, I just couldn't care less. Just buy an Nexus 7 unless you really need. Like,
no,
I
okay,
just
so
don't understand
the Kindle
the
Fire
need.
HD, the 7-inch Kindle Fire HD is available right now.
Okay.
And so no one has done this. No one has like seen if they've improved
of course
things.
not.
Because that was really frustrating. I remember
Again, of course not. Yeah, nobody. I mean, it's just like we'll just take them at their word. Of course, it's got to be faster, right? They wouldn't be doing this to do anything nefarious, you know.
So here's a question: did they update the I feel like an idiot. I haven't followed this. Did they update the original Kindle Fire's OS as well?
No, that is still running on Gingerbread.
Really?
The new ones, like they released this updated Kindle Fire, which is almost exactly the same as the Kindle Fire that we reviewed.
Yeah.
The only difference is that's I think like millimeters smaller. And it's the same thickness, millimeters smaller, double the RAM, and it runs ICS, right? Like, and that's it. They just double the RAM and updated the OS, and they're now selling it as the 2012 Kindle Fire.
Yeah, and it has
the old one doesn't
faster
get a
SoC.
software update, no?
Nope.
Wow.
Dude, that's terrible. Like,
I don't
that's
think
not
the
okay.
old one got a software update from the time that we reviewed it. Like
it didn't. It didn't. When we did our last performance test on it,
yeah,
right? That was the last time I updated it. When we did the Nexus 7 review, I dusted it off. I'm like, oh, let me just update it, and there was no update. And I thought something was wrong. Like maybe I just broke something. So I Googled it, and of course that was the last update. And I was like, this is completely unacceptable.
Yeah, because it wasn't acceptable then. right? Like,
yeah, their whole thing with Silk was, oh, don't worry, it's going to get better, right? And
Yeah,
for
that's a
people,
lie.
For people who aren't familiar with it, their Silk browser, the whole idea was that they were going to do server-side caching of resources, so that when you made a web request, you would effectively get it served through the Amazon CDN, right? Rather than directly from, the web server you're talking to. And then they would be able to kind of bundle up and do all the individual requests together, and you get it from one place at one low latency connection, and it's going to be awesome. And it wasn't, because no one has crappy Wi-Fi. Like, I mean, I don't know. The Wi-Fi would, and I even did it tethered over like AT&T 3G, right? And at the time, I think I was getting 1 or 2 megabit down, and it was still slower than loading directly from servers. So their whole promise was, oh, don't worry, this is going to get better, and it just never did, I guess.
well, yeah, I mean, there was Silk, but Silk was like, you can live with that. My biggest problem was it wasn't smooth. It didn't feel fast. It felt slow. And that
So
never
the
got
reason I
fixed.
couldn't live with Silk is because they put time into that they could have put into making your problems go away, which is making it smooth, adding GPU acceleration and GPU optimized drawing libraries, right? Like that seemed like an insane trade-off. And the trade-off was
Yeah,
purely
even
made.
Samsung could do that.
Yeah. And the trade-off is purely made so what, Amazon can data mine your browsing habits?
Exactly. Yeah. even
Yeah,
though
because I
everybody
mean,
was
it's not like they
"Oh."
weren't trying to sell you something every time you touch the device, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just so easy to accidentally spend money while using a Kindle Fire. That's why I couldn't take it. I was like, yeah, this is great as a $200 tablet. Unfortunately,
Really?
I'm not.
Well, what are you buying? Books or movies or music?
I don't want to buy anything. I don't want to.
Yeah, but you're saying that you like just like they sucker you into like,
no,
oh, you need to buy this new
I
refrigerator.
didn't end up paying for anything. It's
Oh.
just that if I wasn't paying attention, like I was always very I was paranoid while using it that Amazon was constantly trying to take my money, right? I don't want to be paranoid when I'm using a tablet, right? I just want to use it. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like,
No, I understand. Well, I mean, here's the other thing too, is that when they have access to that, it's like Amazon's big thing has always been, how do we optimize what you're gonna buy? So we want to sell you things before you know that you want them. Like for me, it's just like always like camera stuff, and just like here are some really weird, confused book things and like phones.
yeah, they've been sending me a
And-
lot of email about laptops recently.
Yeah, so they can optimize this even better when they like, here's what you're reading, here's what you're watching, maybe even here's what music you listen to. Like I know that that's what's in the back of their mind, is that just this is sort of like, you need to keep this in mind with all these players, is that more data that goes into building like this huge, I don't want to say dossier, but basically that's what it is, of you translates to more conversions and selling things. And that's why I was like, yeah, I'm willing to accept that the ship has sailed with Google. Like it's sailed, like wave goodbye, it's already happened. But I'm not going to let it happen to Amazon to me yet.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I understand the Prime part. I think that's a value add. I don't know. I'm willing to like let them know what I read all the time in terms of print books. So maybe they should be mildly like concerned, or like know what I'm reading. But I don't know. The illumination is so much better than on the Paperwhite. Like if you're gonna buy a Kindle to read books. See, and that's what's weird to me too, is they have this double speak where they just like trash talk LCDs all the time. Like, remember the thing where they're like, oh, the Nook is terrible. Like, you don't want to read on an LCD, or like the iPad is terrible. Like, you don't want to read like any of this stuff. Remember? But then they turn around and like, we're selling an LCD.
Yeah, but then
Right? Like, you can't have it both ways.
their
like,
their
I'm
platform
sorry,
with
that's
the
just not
LCDs
okay.
is selling video though, right? Like they will actually give you a 1 month or 3 month free trial to their video store, if you buy a Kindle Fire, or at least they used to, right? So it's like now they're not trying to sell you books; they're trying to sell you everything, magazines.
So I'm curious what the long-term play is here, right? Like, so obviously Amazon's not content with you just buying a Nexus 7 and then using Amazon's video streaming, right? They want the opportunity to present you their platform that's optimized for their services. But the market's not going to accommodate all of this, right? The market's not going to accommodate everyone who wants to sell you a video service coming out with their own device. What do you guys think happens long term, right? Like the things that seem to always win are one universally great service that works across all devices. And if that's the end goal, I don't see room for a Kindle Fire.
Neither do I. See, I don't think it makes any sense. Like, they already have built the Android app. They've already built the iOS apps. Why do we need to compete in a space that we can't, that's not our main execution point? And I think that if you look at it, it all comes down to, I hate to say it, and I know I'm going to catch flack for it, but it comes down to Bezos wants to be Steve Jobs, right? Like, there's this thing, this expectation that is there that he needs to live up to, and so we're just going to have a ton of products, right? And like, you can take it one step further. Why do they need a phone, right? Like, none of those ever work. Again, and the value in all these different devices is the longevity and updates. Like, I don't buy anything if I don't know that I can't get an update. And at least on Android, like the carrier subsidized phones, you now are basically guaranteed to get at least one. If I can't even get one with the old Kindle Fire, why would I ever buy another one? And same with the
technically
normal
you did
Kindle.
get one. It just wasn't a very good update.
It wasn't.
It was a point update, though. It's not a
Yeah.
major platform update.
Correct.
That's what I'm saying. You need one major platform update. Like, they've never updated any of the old Kindles. You know, like the previous generation Kindle doesn't get the new Kindle software, which is wildly different. You know?
Yeah, no, that's true.
Well, you don't see Netflix coming out with a tablet in order to sell you video. They're doing the thing where they're working with every sort of device out there in order to bring you an optimized app. So on your consoles, on your devices.
So the original Kindle Fire to me, and I agree with that, right? Like it makes sense because they don't need to. They already have a great platform. The original Kindle Fire to me addressed a problem that existed in the market at the time, which was you could not get good hardware for $199. But that's no longer a problem, right? Like everyone has, I mean, you can effectively get the same SoC that you get in a $499 tablet in a $199 tablet, right? Like that problem's been solved. So I feel like Amazon's role in the space as, good guy Amazon shows up, forces price down, then just can step back and let the market, do its thing now. I feel like that's what I was expecting, although that's a foolish expectation for any company.
Do you think that it's somebody's child project inside the company and they want to see it?
Well, it sells a ton of
Jeff
units.
Bezos. Jeff Bezos.
Well,
Sorry,
I mean,
but that's the obvious reality.
So the Kindle Fire
It sells a ton
sold
of units there.
really well, right? They
Yes.
had to make a follow-up. There's no questions that they were somehow just going to let it go, right?
And the thing is, let's be honest here. The device that would end all of this is if Microsoft had options at these price points, right? If there was a $299 Windows RT tablet and a $499 Windows 8 RT LTE tablet, then that like easily puts an end to all of this. But I still think there's like a little bit of room in the market for someone to compete here. I feel like no one has completely driven them out. I think at the $199 price point, Nexus 7 does a great job. But there's still these two other price points, $499 with LTE and $299 without it, that we don't have good alternatives in the market yet.
Do you think the $499 with LTE is just a bit crazy, though? I
Yes.
mean, why is that so expensive?
Well,
And then the other question that I have is, I want to know, just give me an FCC ID. Like, I need to email our guy. And because I want to know what they're talking about with, we have like 1 million bands and we made our own LTE thing. And I really, like, that's the interesting, that and the fact that it has two stream, I hate the term dual antenna, 2-stream Wi-Fi.
Yes.
Because I know exactly what TI combo that is. That is exciting to me. Like, so major props for that sort of stuff. Minus props for just like, this is a huge mess. There are way too many Kindles. I don't understand
I think
what's
part of
going
it is
on.
I remember talking to ARM a few years back, and we were talking about how crazy things are getting and everyone trying different form factors and so on and so forth. And their viewpoint was we don't see an end to consolidation, right? Where people kind of consolidate against clear form factors. There's just going to be this kind of gross expansion where everyone's trying new and different things. And I think that's exactly what Amazon's doing here with this entire Kindle Fire lineup. It's that, hey, we don't actually know what people want, so we're going to give them different discrete verticals that they can play in, and then we'll see what sticks. And they're reasonably well educated, right? Like so 7-inch makes a lot of sense. That's very portable. Something closer to 9 or 10 inches makes sense. And people seem to like cellularly tablets with cellular connectivity. So that makes sense. And then you kind of have a product in each one of those spaces, and then you see what works.
It's not free LTE though. Like
No,
you
it
have
is
to
not.
pay for it. They give
Yes.
you your one free like sample, one free whatever.
Yeah.
But then you pay for it. That's just what I don't know. I find that. Weird.
Can't you just tether to your phone?
What do you mean? Oh, you mean tether the tablet to your phone? Well, you're
Yeah.
from the UK where it's like that's everybody does that. Here you have to pay extra. Like it's
Yeah.
my data. There's a double dipping. Literally, there's just a double dip because you're paying first for your data, and then you pay another fee to use it however you want.
Yes.
Whereas in the rest of the world, that's just like, hey, that's illegal. That's double dipping. But I mean,
What?
this is the same country that it's okay to charge for sending and receiving text messages and calls. So like double dipping is part of the DNA. Like that ship sailed, wave goodbye. Like all these things, like the status quo, it's just impossible to change.
Yes. I don't pay to receive text messages. You're crazy.
It is crazy. It's nuts.
Yeah, man.
Wait, so
Sorry. Go ahead.
no. That we no longer have to pay for that if you do the new mobile family share plans, though, right? Like that's
The tethering thing.
yes.
Yeah. But I
Right.
mean, that's just like literally that is just a strategy to get you on those.
Yes.
See, all I'd want to do is set my mobile phone up as a Wi-Fi hotspot, connect the tablet to the phone does the data.
Well, that's what I want too. That's why I only bought the like El Cheapo one. Like I bought the cheapest possible Paperwhite. You know, it was like $119. Like I don't even care about seeing ads. My brain has such a good filter. I don't even see ads. Like I couldn't tell you what the last ad I saw was. No, somebody commented this to me one time too. That they were like, "Hey, do you see that ad?" And I was like, "No, what? There were ads there?" Like I just filter it out. Like it's just completely filtered.
Your brain comes built in with ad block.
Basically, it's crazy though. If you think about this new generation, I'm sure that they're going to have even better filtering.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you know what the other thing about the Paperwhite that's a negative I should note is that they have storage from 4 gigs to 2, and they removed the audio playback functionality. So there's, even though the audio playback was below atrocious, like no, I'm not even joking. Like I see a lot of terrible sound. I hear a lot of terrible sound implementations on phones while I'm testing them. Even though we don't always talk about it, I always listen to songs that I know on my IEMs, the 535 Shure. And so I've heard a lot of just like terrible garbage, just things that are unimaginable. But the previous generation Kindle in my mind stands out as the worst. But admittedly, it was an experimental feature. But so apparently they finally just gave up. Like they were just like, yeah, the audio is so garbage, we're not even going to include it as like an extra maybe it works feature. So that's gone along with the extra storage. But I don't know. I'm going to write it up. Like I think this is huge. The fact that they added illumination is great, and that it, you know, the display is higher res too. Like it actually is much better.
That's awesome. Yeah, I haven't actually even seen one in person. I need to do that.
Oh, it's pretty. It's really pretty. Like major props for making this the right way finally.
Have you used the illuminated Barnes and Noble one? They introduced that.
No, I haven't. I wanted to
sometime.
try that one.
Okay.
I wanted to try that one, but I don't play in the Barnes and Noble space like I did the original Nook. I think at one point I had one, or like I gave it to somebody. I was like I bought it and I was like, here, it's a gift now. Like I don't want it anymore. You know, like I know that's terrible, but you know, hey, I didn't want it. So
Oh wait, like the
but-
old one with e-ink and an LCD. Is that the one you're talking
I think
about?
so yeah, the one with the color display at the bottom.
Yeah. Oh man, those
yeah,
are
that thing was intriguing.
yeah, those are weird. I never jumped into Barnes and Noble until I think the color or something. I reviewed one at some point.
See, I think the Nexus 7 ate all of their cake. Like the previous Nook color was this sort of like cheap Android tablet thing. The previous Kindle was the same thing. Now, I mean, the right way to do it is to just have it be a Nexus device.
Yeah, I mean,
and
the
Google
Nexus
play
7
with
is
it.
just an order of magnitude better than the Nook tablet, the old Kindle Fire, and I'm assuming the new Kindle Fire too. It's just.
And the Nexus 7 gets updates, right? Like that's
Again, that's where the value is.
Yeah.
Like it's especially if you're talking about resale value, which is something that it just bothers me that a lot of people worry about. I don't know why, but maybe it's just because I'm colored by the fact that I have to keep everything. But for comparison or whatever. But yeah, it's not gonna have any resale value if it's running an old OS, right? Like who wants that?
Tablets in general
I don't know.
don't have very much resale value just because I don't know. It's really hard to sell tablets on Craigslist.
Yeah. And you're in a market where there's like actual people buying and selling things on Craigslist, like not stolen.
No,
goods
there's a fair amount of
like
stuff
just
that's
shady.
stolen goods.
No, but like you're always telling me, so Vivek, you're always telling me about like here's this awesome deal, and then I go to my Craigslist and it's just barren, or it's just like it's all Cricket phones that have been flashed.
Nice.
Like that's all that there is here to sell. It's just like stolen things.
So that's the awesome thing.
On my Craigslist in Tucson.
I ended up picking up a Nexus 7 off of Craigslist, a 16 gig brand new in box and everything for like $160. I was like,
Wow.
you can't top that.
That's a really good deal.
And you didn't have to like go into a shady alleyway and the guy was like looking over his shoulder and like,
Nah,
I need to be near my truck in case the police come by.
I met with the guy at like the Safeway next to my house. This is like, it's just quick. That's it.
That's brave.
Done.
That's brave. I sold my 4S to buy the unlocked one, and the dude was like, "Come into my car," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is the last time that I'm gonna be seen alive." So I texted everybody and I was like, "Here, I'm getting into this guy's car. Like, I need to sell my 4S. If I disappear, like, just like you get all my equipment or like computer stuff." But no, I got in his car. He's like, I can't get out of my car because I have like my kids in here, and I'm going to like I'm taking them. And they were like babies. So I was like, "Oh really? Well, the trust was the other way." I'm pretty sure, like, I was surprised. Like, it was like a nice car. It was like an Audi A4, Like, so I was like, okay, well, either I'm gonna, like, just disappear, or so he was just like, here's, like, a ton of cash. But that's how all my Craigslist experiences go, is that I go against my better judgment, and then I just, like, narrowly avoid getting disappeared.
Yeah, you shouldn't get into random dudes' cars. That's not, even if they're babies in the picture, I don't think that's a good idea.
I like straddled the outside, It was very awkward.
Yeah. You never always get all the way in. You just kind of like, okay.
Yeah, it was just like my arms. So like he could have like, I don't know. This is a tangent. I'm sorry.
That's fine. So we're running short on time, but we have a bunch of other stuff to discuss. Let's say we pick two. So you want to talk, Brian, T-Mobile acquisition, 1X, 1VX, or the Nexus stuff? And then we definitely
need to have Vivek talk about Scuffgate.
Yeah, so in addition to Scuffgate, which one of those three do you want to talk about, Brian?
Ooh, well, we should talk a little bit about the 1X Plus and VX.
Okay, let's do that.
T-Mobile acquisition briefly. I mean, there's not a lot to say with the T-Mobile acquisition. Like, there are people who talk about this endlessly, but to me, it's all obvious. So I don't know. I mean, I didn't even really cover it, which is probably just like I should have. More? I don't know. I never know whether the readers
at a high
are
level,
interested.
Can you explain to folks who aren't familiar what happened? Who acquired who?
So Deutsche Telekom is going to acquire Metro PCS, and basically this is going to enable them to deliver more, wider LTE channel bandwidths in markets. And again, Metro PCS will have a migration path for their handsets to LTE. Like, it's just very exciting because so what's happening is over the next couple of years, assuming the FCC approves all this, the Metro PCS assets will become part of T-Mobile. Like, they merge into this NewCo company, and basically, in the combination of AWS that T-Mobile is getting from the AT&T failed acquisition, and then the AWS that's coming from Metro PCS, T-Mobile is going to suddenly have enough bandwidth to deliver 20 megahertz FDD, frequency division duplexing LTE in some markets by, I believe, 2015, which is going to be awesome. So, and at present, the other players are only doing 10 megahertz LTE. T-Mobile's initial launch plan is 10 megahertz LTE. And then they're also going to have HSPA Plus on AWS. So 2 carriers of AWS, WCDMA, 2 carriers on PCS. And this is all possible because they're getting all these Metro PCS assets. So, I mean, it's just very exciting because T-Mobile is going to emerge as a real big, competitor. They're talking about we're going to be a big publicly traded company. We're going to be able to do battle with Sprint better. Metro PCS is moving away from CDMA. Like Metro PCS was first with LTE. But of course, they're not as big of a player. They were first with VoLTE. They already have VoLTE. So they're just moving away from CDMA entirely. And so it's just very exciting. I don't know. Just to me, anybody that's talking seriously about 20 megahertz frequency duplex LTE gets me excited. Like, I don't care what the cost is. Even though I know with T-Mobile it's going to be cheap. That just gets me very excited because we're talking about double with the UE category 3 device, like 150 megabits as opposed to 70 megabits. No, I'm sorry, 100 megabits as opposed to, if you move up to another category, you can get 150 megabits. Basically, you just go faster. You add more resource blocks. So I think that's the long and short of it. And yeah, they're moving forwards with their modernization plan, and they're also going to go the remote radio head architecture route. So they're going to put the base station on the top of the cell site, on top of the tower, which is the same as what AT&T's done, and Sprint. So now AT&T, Sprint, and T-Mobile have gone with the RRH, remote radio head architecture, and only Verizon's gone with the base station at the bottom architecture. So I mean, that's interesting as well. But those are the big things. I don't know what else there is to say.
What do you think this does in terms of where does it put T-Mobile as a competitor to, let's say, the AT&T and Verizons of North America, or of the US?
Well, again, it makes them a potentially very big competitor, right? So, like T-Mobile doesn't have any LTE at present; they just run DC HSPA plus. So as a result, with all this AWS, they can now run DC HSPA plus and LTE in most markets no problem, and now they can run that even more. So there's a possibility to do even 15 megahertz if they're able to get the T-Mobile, the Metro PCS LTE band to work in conjunction. So you can do 15, if it's all adjacent, they can do 15 megahertz. Otherwise they can do 10 and 5. I don't know, it's just very, very interesting. They're emerging as a, strong player, and for me that's interesting because I want to see 150 megabit downlink with category 4 and 20 megahertz. Yeah. So, and that becomes a possibility.
What's the time frame for all this? You mentioned 2015 earlier. Is that being kind of,
yeah, when 2015 is the time for the 20 megahertz to potentially get lit up, or 2014 depending on things, or in 2013 they'll have 10 megahertz. There's a lot of these plans that aren't really final. It's been discussed. Basically, what I'm more interested in is the potential, what's the path going forwards look like.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I don't want to waste too much time on that, but that's just very interesting. And it's even more interesting in an immediate, sense, this PCS migration to HSPA plus, because then you can get devices like the iPhone and bring your own AT&T device onto Metro PCS, onto T-Mobile or Nuco or whatever we're going to call it. And then, do a pay-as-you-go plan. So we're starting to see this very aggressive third party emerge. And I've sort of always wanted this player, and they're becoming that player.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
No, that's really exciting.
I can't wait for T-Mobile's 1900 megahertz band to be converted over to HSPA plus. Like,
You don't have any of that where you are in Seattle?
Well, it's only in Bellevue, right? So it's in very specific pockets around T-Mobile's headquarters. I actually had a friend post about it on Facebook. He was like, "Oh man, we finally got 1900 megahertz, or I finally get 3G on my iPhone," and he's on T-Mobile. And I was like, "Are you in Bellevue? Because we don't get it in Seattle, right?" And he's like, "Yeah,
Gotcha.
I'm in Bellevue Square, right, or like a mall, right near T-Mobile's headquarters." So they haven't gone wide with it yet. It's just there in very specific pockets.
I've seen testing. Like, I got to play with it for Google I/O. That was fun. Of course, it got loaded pretty fast. So all the new handsets can do WCDMA on PCS. All the T-Mobile ones that are new can do that. So they will roam over and load balance. So it's not like you'll get the whole carrier to yourself. But actually, last night at like midnight, I drove out to some random place.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter.
So there's a Twitter account that's like UMTS 1900 that's tweeting, like, based on this crowdsourced map where there are sightings of WCDMA on 1900 for T-Mobile. So one popped up and I was like all excited and I drove out there and there wasn't anything, but I clearly found a base station. So I mean, I don't doubt that maybe it was testing for a while, but it wasn't testing when I got there. So, oh well. I don't know. We should move along though, I think.
Yeah, no, totally. So real quick, you want to touch on the 1X Plus and 1VX before we get to pick Vivek's brain about anodization?
Yeah, so the 1X Plus. So this is I played with the 1X Plus while I was at the frequencies. I believe it's okay to say that.
Yes.
'Cause I saw other people saying that. Basically, the 1X Plus is a 1X with AP37 instead of AP33. So Tegra 3 AP37 is 1.7 gigahertz max single clock, so max single core clock, as opposed to the AP33s, which is 1.5 gigahertz, I believe, and then 1.4 gigahertz for all four, I believe. So basically, they get a nice bump. And then in addition, this is where we see. So for a long time, I've been going on and on about how there's this weird like belief in this space, the smartphone space, that Tegra 3 isn't compatible with LTE. I'm doing air quotes around compatible because I don't know what that means, because it doesn't mean anything because it's wrong.
Can I just say that I think you do air quotes at least once every podcast?
Yeah, I bet so. Because it's like everybody's like, it's not compatible with LTE. Well, what does that mean? Like, what are you talking about? Like, the interface isn't there? Like, really? It's all just USB or HSIC. So whatever. Anyways, so that's not true. And finally, we have a device that proves me right, which is, I never doubted the fact that this was just always an illogical argument. But it has MDM 9215, which I've been talking about forever. So it has LTE. So both the LTE version of the 1X Plus that's global, the 1X Plus on AT&T with LTE, and the 1X Plus International with just WCDMA are all AP37. And the LTE versions have MDM 9215, which is the same IP block as what's in MSM 8960 for modem. It's the same baseband as what's in iPhone 5. iPhone 5 is 9615. But it's literally, so that part exists, enables you to do LTE because it's voice enabled natively. They have the voice coder on there. And so boom, there goes that rumor finally, which was just always ridiculous and an engineering limitation. Like, you couldn't do voice without shipping an SoC fusion combo. So yeah, so that phone is exciting, and it's got a bigger battery and all the same stuff, just like a spec bump. I wish that it had external storage. Like, that was my big, when I first told we're doing a 1X Plus, I was like, please tell me you added an SD card slot. But there is no SD card slot. But instead, you get 64 gigs on the AT&T version. You get the option for 32 or 64 on the global and global LTE versions. And it's all the same 1X Plus, although they bumped up the front-facing camera, which is dramatically better. So those are the changes, and it's great. So,
and
yeah.
Did they announce pricing for the 1X Plus on AT&T?
No, they didn't. But I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't be like 199.
Well, because that'd be pretty cool, right? 64 gigs for on the 199, with 2-year contract. I think that would be a step in the right direction.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the current One X Plus is down to like, I believe 99 or free or $50 or something really low.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then
of
there's
course it will relaunch with 4.1.
Oh, nice. And then there's the HTC One VX, and what's that?
The One VX is kind of a weird thing that we hadn't seen before, and I feel like that was just because it's an AT&T exclusive, and it's like a 1V, but spec bumped a bit. So it contains an 8930, which is the dual core crate with Adreno 305 and LTE, the same modem block as 8960, and then 9x15 modem, and it's like a 1V but AT&T-ified and with better SoC.
Nice.
Like the 1V is like 8x55. This is 8930, but it still has the 5 megapixel camera with image sense and the same optics. So we'll see what that's priced at. But I mean, it looks cool. I haven't played with it. Very interesting. It's kind of weird that AT&T did this instead of a 1S. It almost looks like a 1S, but it's not. But it's a 1VX. So I feel like the V is there because it's like a 1V.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of an interesting device. Kind of a weird niche. We'll see. Yeah.
So that brings us to Brian. One thing you wanted to get Vivek's take on, which is just the scuffing that people are seeing on their iPhones.
Yeah. Specifically, the anodization on the black model scraping off.
Yeah. Okay.
And I know, Vivek, you've looked into this quite a bit. What's your take on why it happens? And I don't know, explain it to everyone.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was pretty curious when I first saw the rumors or not the rumors, but I first saw it kind of hit the internet that the black ones are scratching a lot. Because Apple's a company that has a lot of experience with anodization and painted anodization too, right? Because they've been doing colors and black and white and silver with anodized iPods and stuff since the 2nd gen Nano, right, which was 5 or 6 years ago. So when I first looked at it, I was like, it makes no sense. So basically, when I looked into it more, I found that it wasn't just the black ones that were scratching. It was just with the black ones, the scratching is more noticeable, right? Because the base aluminum color contrasts really strongly with the black, right? Whereas with the silver, the base aluminum color is almost the same, so much harder to see. So basically, how anodization works is that they oxidize part of the silver, and then they inject a dye, and then boil it to seal the color in. And so when they oxidize, they grow the oxidization from the material surface in both directions, right? So in and out. So what this does, right, it oxidizes, a decent portion of the thickness, right? You lose material thickness. So, or I guess you lose structural material thickness. So, with the iPhone 5, the aluminum itself is very thin. And you can see that when you look at, like if you turn it around and see the plastic windows, and then you see what's kind of on the edge of that, right? It's the material thickness is, it's really, really thin.
They've machined out all the majority of the material, right? It's all gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not there, right? So, and that's also true of the back, right? It's very, very thin aluminum, much thinner than what you'd see on, like a MacBook Pro, or even like their older iPods, where the material thickness was easily like a millimeter, right? Maybe even a bit thicker than that. So I guess what my theory is, and I have been very trying to avoid scratching up my iPhone too badly. But what I've basically realized is that they're only oxidizing a very thin portion of it, because if they oxidized more, you'd run into structural integrity issues, right? Like the metal itself being, quite brittle or prone to fracture, right? Or failure. So because they can only oxidize a very thin layer of it, that coating scratches off correspondingly easier, right? And so if, like with the black ones, it just once a little bit goes, you're just down to the base metal coat, and now your black iPhone look like it looks like you've scraped off lots of it, where really you haven't. It's just that it's really, really thin, right?
Gotcha.
So
there's no real solution to this, right? Like that's just how it is. That's the design decision.
Yeah, I mean, it really is.
How thick would you expect the anodization to be on a smartphone? Sort of a few hundred microns, maybe more.
Yeah, maybe a few hundred microns would probably be a little bit on the low side. I would expect it to be a bit more than that, but not much, right? Because it's we're talking 0.x millimeters, right, for the entire material, right?
Yeah, it looks really thin along the edges.
Yeah, I think it's
where I've noticed a lot of scratching is that like camphor.
Yeah,
like the camphor seems to be the first place that it silvers. Like
the
way this started is when I was in Korea, I got to look at Vince from Slash Gear, his pre-sampled phone, and he was like, I've been using it this whole time and I've been babying it, and look at these scratches. And that's when I was like, oh god, I wish I could change my pre-order to white.
Yeah, but the camphor itself, it's not anodized the same. Like you see that the material finish is different, right?
Yes. How do they do that?
I think that's just a post-anodized machining, I think.
Oh, so they anodize and then they do this cut for the camphor and then treat it somehow.
Yeah, that would be my assumption.
Because otherwise it would be like matte as well, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so like that scratches off really easy because that's not even anodized, right? Like that's just, or I guess yeah, it's not even really anodized. It's just painted, and I've in the course of investigating, I have scraped off decent portions of the camphor. The things I do for this job.
I've noticed the other places also where it shows immediately are the little bands, like the boundary between the plastic isolation gap, the antenna band, and where the metal starts, because that seems to be probably like there was a finger there or something, or like the electric field was weird. I don't know what the deal was, but that's where I've noticed it flakes off.
Yeah,
a lot.
And I would also think that some of that is due to like just because there's a difference in surface there. So
gotcha.
If you just accidentally nick it, it'll start there, I guess.
Yeah.
Just because there's an edge, right, from the plastic to the metal. So
I guess the question is I mean, like I called it Scuffgate earlier, but really I think there's a tendency for everybody to look for what's the big gate thing we're gonna pimp up this time. Like ever since, like previously it was
antenna gate.
This was the theme last time. Yeah, it was antenna, even though that was real. But then it was like battery gate, and then this time it's like purple haze / scuff.
Yeah,
but I mean, like mine hasn't been scuffed too much. I don't know. Like I can't complain.
I've had mine in a case for precisely this reason. And for the record,
yeah,
I
same.
do blame you for swaying me towards the black one. I was going to order.
It looked awesome.
I was going to order a white one, right? And then I wouldn't have to worry about it so much. But no. I mean,
I'm sorry. These are the things you can't tell when you're looking at the demo units that are just like on the, like the black one looks cool. It's like Darth Vader black.
No, it looks phenomenal. I love it.
Yeah, it's awesome. But at the same time, like if I wanted something that wasn't going to show aging, I would have gone for the white.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I don't know. I've found that it's at the very least resistant to like fingernails, like on the back, right? The back face.
True. Yeah.
I think the material thickness is like it's thicker, Not by much, but definitely thicker. The guys that have keys and like end up keying it accidentally, like that's that's just your fault. Like it's the whole scuffgate, it's real. I just don't think it's that big of a like I guess maybe because I understand why it happened. And
fundamentally there's no way around it, right? Like the trade-off would be additional device thickness.
Yeah, or if they were to put some kind of coating on it afterwards, but then that
we know how Johnny I feels about coatings, though.
Well, yeah, exactly, right, and that also ruins kind of the feel of the material because it changes it. You're not touching bare aluminum at that point, right?
Yeah.
So, post treatment and that kind of stuff, it just it wouldn't be quote unquote the Apple way, if you will. So, there really isn't. I get a case.
Which adds thickness.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, right? Like any way you slice this, you're adding thickness.
A question: when you get one of these scuffs, obviously you're scratching off the anodized layer and you're leaving sort of the bare aluminium underneath. But aluminium doesn't obviously become aluminium in the air; it oxidizes itself to aluminium oxide. So if you get a scratch, obviously taking off this protective sort of anodized layer, does that mean that there's scope for additional structural weakness the more scratches you get?
Not significantly. I mean, because you're already talking about a part of it that's not structural, right? And it's like aluminum doesn't react to oxygen that strongly, right? And so there's nothing that I've seen that would suggest that it would significantly impact anything other than the look and resale value.
Yeah, because it forms that oxide really quickly. Like the extent of my materials knowledge is build your telescope out of one material so that it expands and contracts the same, which boils down to make it all out of beryllium and give yourself cancer. But I have always wondered with these Apple devices, what aluminum is this? Is this T6061? Vivek, do you know what it is?
I do not.
Like my MacBook has the softest aluminum ever. Like it dents if I look at it wrong.
Oh yeah.
Because it needs to be machinable. Like what is that? Is that 50? Is that 5000 series? It's machinable. Like
no,
I gotta be in that class. So. Which is more machinable, like, because they're doing, like, crazy CNC stuff, aren't they?
Yeah, but it's not that crazy. I mean, it's just... I mean, they have really, really precise CNC machines. And, like, they're doing a lot of post-machining metalwork, right? Like, brushing or anodizing and dyeing, It's a pretty involved process, but I don't think...
But we don't know what type of metal it is.
No.
That's always interested me. Like, if I could ask one thing, it would be like, yeah, what series of aluminum is this?
More than... my biggest question with Apple, or that I would ask, is actually about tolerances of various parts. Because that's always fascinated me. Like the speaker grills.
So they were talking about microns this time, right?
Yeah. I mean, the speaker grills on MacBook Pros and, this, it's really, really expensive to get parts made that small, basically. The tolerances that they have must be insane.
Well, aren't these laser cut holes? Are you talking about the speaker grill, like, holes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, they're not quite so fine on this, but like if you look at a MacBook Pro speaker grill, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess whoever's on a MacBook Pro right now, it's those are really, really fine holes. So yeah. Anyways, that's tangent.
Those are some fine looking holes.
Yeah.
You know what bothers me a lot about the iPhone 5 ID is that I know this is dumb, but the nano SIM like tray thing, like nowhere near matches. Like I know we talked about this on Twitter.
Yeah.
But it just like in no way matches. Like it is so far. You can't even squint at it and be like, oh, okay, they kind of tried. Like it was like this is completely different hue.
Yeah, it's a different
just
color.
Just like what were you guys doing? Yeah.
And it's not the only thing. You know, my iPhone 5, I found out like 2 or 3 days in that it wasn't like the display. It clips in to the entire, just the front side clips into the aluminum frame, and mine wasn't clipped in all the way. I actually
really, so yours was sticking out.
Yeah, a little bit. So it wasn't.
Wow.
I wish I had taken a picture. I completely spaced. I was like, oh my god, what is going on? When I realized it, but basically my display was actually a little bit tilted because none of the 3 clips on top were actually clipped in. So I actually, took a leap of faith and I just pressed.
Yeah, you snapped it back.
Yeah,
I mean, that's how these are.
in.
It's built like the 3G, 3GS with the like, you pop out the bottom 2 screws and then suction cup the front off.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you just did that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did that for fun. Well, because I like to take them apart when I'm in like looking at them. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's how this one is built. Same as the 1X, by the way. Like I know people were complaining about the 1X.
Well, 1X is
like you literally just suction cup the front out.
It's pretty similar to the Sensation, except not user removable, right? Kind of.
Yeah. Well, it is sort of like you can take your 1X in your hands. I do this like I fidget with the 1X and I like just pop the whole thing apart. Like I've like it's very easy. You can just push down on the like bottom speaker grill thing, where the mic is, or I guess it's at the top, but I'm holding it so it's bottom, and then the whole assembly just pops out and then it slides out just like the Sensation.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's
you can
how
do this
it
in your
looks
hands.
like
that's how and that's how this is built too.
But it's just they had a decent number of quality control issues. Yeah.
Well, Anand's button is busted, isn't it? Your home button?
Really?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The my personal device, the home button, if you just like press it lightly, it doesn't activate anything. You have to like really push it down hard.
Huh.
Which is weird to me because that was a big emphasis apparently.
Yeah, I mean the
like
feel
my
itself
home button
is different.
seems way better. Yeah.
Yeah, on the other ones I've used, it's fine, but on my personal unit, like the one I ordered through my upgrade or whatever, that was the home button's kind of busted on that one.
See, I never know whether this is like something we should chalk up to these are the first runs or just like QC is going to get better, or do you talk about this in the review? Like my first iPhone experience, I had a bum camera. Like my pictures were purple. Like so I thought it was just really terrible. I'm actually not kidding. The purple, it was like the skies were solarized and it was like looking at everything how I would imagine like an acid trip. Like I've never done any drugs, but that's what I would imagine, like just look through this phone and that's what it would look like. And this is like I carried that around for a week thinking it was normal until I saw another one and I was like, wow, your pictures look awesome. Yeah.
Wait, and this was with the original 2G? Or like
no, actually a 3GS, the first one that I bought. Like I'm gonna use this as like for me.
Okay.
So I think my philosophy on all those types of problems is you always report it so that people know that there's a data point out there that this has happened. The trick is to I see a lot of writers do this. They have something that impacts them and they have no concept of like how widespread the issue is and whatever. Their first reaction is, I'm just going to rant about it. And I don't believe that that's right, but I think that you contributing to the general good by just saying, hey, this happened to me, and posting if there was or wasn't any resolution to it, I think that's useful data.
Well, like the Wi-Fi thing, that's very weird to me too, because 2 days ago, I thoroughly tested all the Wi-Fi stuff, and I don't know what problem people are talking about. Like Wi-Fi in general, reception is improved. The 5 gigahertz to 2.4 gigahertz handoff is how I would have done it. It's not very chattery, like the Galaxy Nexus implementation. It doesn't have like any hysteresis, what's a way of putting it? It doesn't switch back and forth a lot. It doesn't chatter.
Oh, nice.
Like when you're building a switch, you don't want it to chatter.
Yeah.
Like with the boundary condition. So they've done a nice job of making sure that when you go to 2.4 and then you like wander back, there's a pretty long time before you hand back to 5. So that was what I assumed was people just like, my Wi-Fi is terrible now.
Yeah.
So I think there are some issues that people always like sort of imagine, or it's like your setup is terrible. You know, like I hate to blame the user, but at some point, you know, I don't know what's changed.
I mean, it's also tough. Like these are I mean, it's a PC, right? It's a PC in your pocket, and it's in all kinds of weird environments that you know, lots of variables, lots of things change. Anyways, now we've gone over the 2-hour mark, so I wanna end things there. Vivek, thank you for joining. You, I think, added useful commentary, and I think it was a good fit. So as always, we will be back in a week talking about whatever happens between now and then. Thank you all for listening. Leave comments, as always, in the podcast thread that goes up. And we'll be posting, like I said, the next one in about a week. Take care, guys.